At 2:17 this morning, local time in Qatar, 3 Iranian ballistic missiles struck Al Udeid Air Base, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, home to 7,000 American personnel, headquarters of Central Command Forward Operations, and the nerve center for every U.S. military action from Afghanistan to Syria, was hit by a coordinated Iranian strike that crossed a line no adversary has crossed in decades. Direct attack on a major American base. Subscribe to this channel immediately, because what I am about to walk you through is not an isolated military incident. This is Iran escalating from proxy warfare to direct strikes on U.S. forces. And this is the United States now facing a decision that will determine whether we enter a full-scale war in the Middle East or find a way to contain the most dangerous military confrontation with Iran since 1979. Turn on notifications, set them to all, because the next 72 hours will reveal whether this strike was a one-time retaliation or the opening salvo of sustained Iranian attacks on American forces across the region. Here is what happened in the 6 minutes between the first missile impact and the moment the base commander confirmed we were under attack. At 2:17 a.m., radar systems at Al Udeid detected 3 inbound ballistic missiles launched from Iranian territory approximately 620 miles away. Flight time, 11 minutes from launch to impact. The base went to alert status. Personnel moved to hardened shelters. Air defense systems activated. But Al Udeid, despite being the largest U.S. base in the region, does not have the same layered missile defense as bases in other theaters. The Patriot batteries were positioned to defend against shorter-range threats. These were medium-range ballistic missiles traveling at speeds that gave defenders less than 4 minutes to respond. At 2:19 a.m., the first missile struck the northern section of the airfield, impacting near the fuel depot. The explosion was massive, visible for miles, and damaged infrastructure critical to flight operations. At 2:21 a.m., the second missile hit the main operations center, a hardened facility where CENTCOM Forward Command coordinates regional military actions. Initial reports indicate the building sustained structural damage, but that personnel inside survived due to the hardened construction. At 2:23 a.m., the third missile struck an aircraft maintenance hangar on the eastern perimeter. Early assessments suggest at least 2 aircraft were destroyed and several others damaged. At 2:23 a.m., 6 minutes after the first impact, the base commander sent an emergency flash message to CENTCOM headquarters in Tampa and to the Pentagon. Quote, Al Udeid under ballistic missile attack, 3 confirmed impacts, casualties unknown, damage assessment underway, base remains operational. Hit that like button right now if you understand what just happened. Iran launched a direct military strike on the largest U.S. air base in the Middle East. The algorithm decides what breaks through. You decide whether this analysis reaches people who need to see it, because what I am showing you is a threshold being crossed. For 45 years, since the Iranian Revolution, Iran has attacked U.S. forces through proxies, through Hezbollah in Lebanon, through Shia militias in Iraq, through Houthi rebels in Yemen. Iran provided weapons, training, intelligence, but avoided direct Iranian military action against American bases. That changed at 2:17 a.m. when Iranian missiles launched from Iranian territory struck a U.S. installation housing 7,000 American personnel. At 2:34 a.m. Qatar time, 11 minutes after the strike, the Pentagon was formally notified. The watch officer in the National Military Command Center received the flash traffic from Al Udeid and immediately activated emergency protocols. The Secretary of Defense was woken and briefed. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs was notified. And at 2:47 a.m. Qatar time, which was 6:47 p.m. Eastern time in Washington, the president was briefed in the Oval Office. According to sources present, the president was told that Al Udeid had been struck by Iranian missiles, that initial reports indicated infrastructure damage and unknown casualties, and that Iran had not issued any warning or communication before the attack. The president's first question was whether this was an isolated strike or the beginning of a broader campaign. The answer was, we don't know yet. At 3:15 a.m. Qatar time, the base commander completed the initial damage assessment. The fuel depot fire was contained but not extinguished. The operations center was damaged but functional. The aircraft hangar was destroyed. 2 F-15E Strike Eagles were confirmed destroyed. 4 additional aircraft damaged, and critically, casualty reports began coming in. At least 11 U.S. personnel killed, 34 injured, some critically. Those numbers were preliminary and based on initial accounting, but they confirmed that American service members had died in a direct Iranian attack. Drop a comment right now and tell me whether you think the United States should respond militarily to this strike. I am reading every response because this is the question the president and his national security team are debating right now. At 4:47 a.m. Qatar time, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps released a statement through state media, quote, "The strike on Al Udeid Air Base was a legitimate act of self-defense in response to ongoing American aggression against the Iranian nation. The United States has conducted cyber attacks on Iranian infrastructure, imposed economic warfare through sanctions, and supported Israeli strikes on Iranian interests. Iran has exercised restraint for years, but that restraint has limits. This measured response demonstrates that American military presence in the region is not invulnerable. Further attacks will follow if U.S. aggression continues." That statement confirms Iran is framing this as retaliation, not escalation. But it also includes the phrase "further attacks will follow," which means Iran is threatening more strikes. Subscribe to this channel right now if you have not already, because what I am about to show you is how the U.S. government is responding and what military options are being considered. At 5:30 a.m. Qatar time, CENTCOM completed a more detailed damage assessment. The base remains operational for fighter aircraft, but refueling capacity is reduced by approximately 40% due to fuel depot damage. The operations center is functioning on backup systems. Air defense posture has been elevated across all U.S. installations in the region, including bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, UAE, and Iraq. Intelligence analysts are reviewing satellite imagery and signals intelligence to determine whether Iran is preparing additional strikes or whether this was a single event. At 6 a.m. Qatar time, the president convened an emergency National Security Council meeting in the Situation Room. Present were the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Director of National Intelligence, the National Security Advisor, and the CIA Director. The meeting lasted 73 minutes. According to sources, the discussion focused on three questions. First, what is Iran's intent? Is this a one-time strike designed to send a message, or is this the beginning of sustained attacks? Second, what are U.S. military response options? Third, what are the risks of escalation if the U.S. retaliates? No decision was made during the meeting, but the president directed the Pentagon to prepare a menu of military response options ranging from limited strikes on Iranian missile sites to broader attacks on IRGC facilities. At 7:15 a.m. Qatar time, congressional leadership was briefed via secure video. After the briefing, Senator Lindsey Graham stated, "Iran has committed an act of war. The president must respond decisively." Senator Chris Murphy stated, "We must respond but not stumble into war. Precision and restraint are essential." At 8 a.m. Qatar time, the Secretary of Defense held a press conference at the Pentagon. Quote, "Early this morning, Iranian forces launched a ballistic missile attack on Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. The attack resulted in the deaths of 11 U.S. service members and injuries to 34 others. The base remains operational. We are conducting a full damage assessment and reviewing all available intelligence to understand Iran's objectives. The United States will respond at a time and place of our choosing. Iran's actions represent a serious escalation and will have consequences." The secretary was asked whether the U.S. would strike Iranian territory. He declined to discuss operational plans, but stated, "All options are on the table." Here is what we are watching over the next 48 to 72 hours. 6 indicators that will tell us whether this escalates or de-escalates. Indicator 1, does Iran conduct additional strikes? More missiles in 24 to 48 hours signals sustained confrontation. Silence suggests Iran is waiting to see U.S. response. Indicator 2, what military response does the president authorize? Airstrikes within 72 hours demonstrate resolve but risk counter-escalation. Holding off suggests preference for diplomatic pressure plus defensive measures. Indicator 3, how do regional allies react? If Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE support retaliation, pressure increases. If they urge restraint, it provides cover for measured response. Indicator 4, does Iran signal willingness to negotiate? Statements suggesting this was limited and further strikes depend on U.S. behavior create diplomatic openings. Doubling down suggests commitment to escalation. Indicator 5, what does intelligence assess about Iranian intent? Signals showing this as standalone inform the response. Intelligence showing preparation for sustained operations changes calculations. Indicator 6, does Congress invoke war powers? Demands for authorization constrain options. Tacit support expands flexibility. Here are the 3 scenarios. Scenario 1, limited retaliation and de-escalation. The U.S. strikes the Iranian missile sites that hit Al Udeid plus select IRGC targets. Iran absorbs the retaliation, condemns it publicly, but does not launch additional strikes. Diplomatic channels through Oman or Qatar facilitate back-channel talks. Within 2 weeks, the crisis de-escalates. This is managed confrontation. Scenario 2, tit-for-tat escalation. The U.S. strikes Iranian targets. Iran responds with more missile attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain. The U.S. launches broader air campaigns. Iran activates Hezbollah, Iraqi militias, Houthis. The conflict expands but stays below full invasion. Weeks or months of exchanges destabilize the region and threaten oil markets. This is prolonged limited war. Scenario 3, total war. The U.S. response is overwhelming. Iran views it as existential and responds with everything. Missiles hit U.S. bases region-wide. Shipping in the Strait of Hormuz is attacked. Proxies strike civilians. The U.S. destroys Iranian military infrastructure, possibly including nuclear sites. Israel joins, hitting Iranian positions in Syria and Lebanon. Oil spikes, markets panic, conflict risks spreading beyond the Middle East. Subscribe right now, like this video, comment with your prediction which scenario happens. I am tracking all 3, and as this unfolds, you will see the analysis here immediately. In January 2020, Iran struck al-Assad Air Base in Iraq after the Soleimani killing, injuring over 100 personnel but causing no deaths. That strike was telegraphed, allowing evacuations. Today's strike was not telegraphed. 11 Americans are dead. Iran has stated more attacks will follow. This is the most direct and lethal Iranian military action against U.S. forces in modern history. What I know for certain right now, at 2:17 a.m. Qatar time, Iranian missiles struck Al Udeid Air Base. 11 U.S. service members were killed. 34 were injured. The base sustained significant damage but remains operational. Iran has claimed responsibility and threatened further attacks. The president has convened the National Security Council and directed the Pentagon to prepare military response options. Congressional leaders have been briefed. Allies in the region are on high alert, and the United States is now facing a decision that will shape Middle East geopolitics for years. Do we retaliate with overwhelming force and risk full-scale war? Do we launch limited strikes designed to impose costs without triggering escalation? Or do we pursue diplomatic channels while strengthening defenses and accepting that Iran has crossed a threshold without immediate military consequence? Each option carries risks. Overwhelming force could spiral into regional war, draw in Israel and Gulf allies, disrupt global oil supplies, and kill thousands. Limited strikes might not deter Iran and could be perceived as weak, encouraging further attacks. Diplomacy without military response might embolden Iran to believe it can strike U.S. forces with impunity. The president must choose, and that choice will be made within the next 48 to 72 hours. Turn on notifications for this channel, because when the U.S. responds, when Iran reacts, when we know which scenario is unfolding, you will see the breakdown here immediately. This is not over. This is Iran conducting the most significant direct attack on U.S. forces in decades, and this is the United States deciding whether to go to war. The Middle East is on the edge, and the next days will determine whether we step back or fall over.